A lot of pressure in the story crafters lounge, because you can't just give a talk, you now have to craft a story. So you'll have to judge me not on just doing a talk, but crafting a story. And when we were thinking about what to talk about today, I've been to Adweek since it started, Advertising Week since it started, and sometimes I've been on stages telling stories. And for the most of the time, it's as a Chief Creative Officer. You can see from this title, Chief Creative Officer. But a year ago, I also took over our business marketing function. So for the marketers in the room, I went from being just a Chief Creative Officer to also having a marketing responsibility. The reason this is interesting is for years as a Chief Creative Officer, I've walked on stages like this giving grand pronouncements about the future of creativity and marketing and what marketers must do. But for the last year, I've had to do it. It's much harder than it sounds. Than when people like me are going, we need to do this, we need to do this. So this talk today is sort of a bit of both. It's a bit of both. There's a bit of practical things that I look at and my team looks at when we're building. And it's a little bit of the creative part of where I sort of see the world and why I'm excited to be in this industry, to be a creative in this industry, and to build some stuff. So we'll go through both of those things. You can see when it transitions. But first I want to talk about change. Every panel at every conference in the world talks about change. And I was thinking about my own career and like the biggest change I've seen in sort of creativity and advertising and marketing over that time. And you can do a mobile and internet, but there's a much simpler change, and it's this. Here's a photo of me. This is me when I started in the business, lifting boxes. Back in the 80s, you lifted boxes for a job in advertising. It was a whole job, not really. I was a copywriter. I was a copywriter in New Zealand. I was out of high school. I got a job at the bottom of the industry, and it was super fancy. And it was fancy because as a kid, I got paid money, not a lot of money, a very small amount of money, but I got paid money to come up with funny things, go on photo shoots, make content. And the most extraordinary part of that job was people around me got to see it. So as I got older and was down the pub, some of the greatest joy in the world was like, oh, I did this thing and I saw it, and people were like, that's amazing. And the ability to create content that affected culture or touched people in a different way was a very small group of people, and I was part of that. And it was a specialness. That specialness now is pretty much every 15-year-old in the developed world, right? So this thing that we have is really, something that has gone from being just one person or just a few people within an industry to everything. So when I think about change, I think about this simple change. Our audience makes more than we do. These formats, these platforms, this paint, this canvas we all work in is not being shaped by a few people that have been anointed to do it. It's being shaped by the people we're communicating with, that we're communicating for, that we're creating for. And that requires a different level of humility in how we approach marketing. So that's sort of the name of this, marketing for the people and by the people. And what I think in this, and I've been talking about this for a while, I think about talking at Adweek for years, the starting point is one that we've gone from a world of finite choice and limited control as consumers of content to infinite choice and total control. That fundamentally changes our relationship with being able to be disrupted. We really don't like it very much. We're very, very good at finding things that are a better use of our time and attention. So as marketers, as media platforms, as technology companies, you name any element of this industry, we need to approach our audience with humility and with the relevance and reward of the things we're putting in front of them. By the people, I've really looked at this recently, particularly when it comes to enormous ideas in the industry where ideas that shape culture are really being shaped by culture. And the dialogue, the creative space that creates that exchange is really where ideas flourish. And through every element of marketing, if we're still in the world where we think we're up in a tower yelling at people, putting messages out, walking away, we're 20 years out of date, we're 10 years out of date now. We really need to design ideas and platforms and use all of this to develop a different kind of relationship. So there's a lot of different things going on. It's very easy to get confused. I get confused as well. So these are 4 simple shifts, sort of how I look at it and how I think about building for the space. Curation, community, conversation, and commerce. Curation is simply having a deep belief that we need to know where people are, we need to understand the context of the reality, and we need to build our messaging and our marketing to meet them where they are. Not where we want to, not where we used to, not what gives us comfort. We have to be very much rooted in the present, and we need to build for that reality. Community is the rise of really thinking about the humanity of the people we serve through our businesses. Most businesses in some way or other will be focused on a purpose. From the mundane to the profoundly superficially interesting, all businesses are charged with this cause, and understanding the diversity of the communities we serve is critical. Conversation, people talk about not just messaging, but this idea of intimacy in marketing, this idea of personalization, this idea of being able to have dialogue. And commerce, those of you in the space that are either in e-commerce businesses or performance marketing businesses building brands or big brands that are looking to drive this. It's a critical part. So let's get into it. So for creating for a curated world, as I said, for me, the simplest way to think about this is we have muscles that we've developed over decades, either in our careers or things we've learned about how you do a campaign or how you build a marketing plan or how we do stuff. And one of the things is because consumer behavior is changing so quickly, because the time of where we spend our time, how we operate, the demands we put on business to service is changing so quickly, we need to be very much rooted in the present. And we need to build for where people are and really how they consume. And as I said in my opening, the thing that's most challenging about this, particularly in the creative industries or the communication industry, is the grammar, the narrative, the language of these forms, stories, other ones that pop up all the time, these new platforms. They're being defined not by a few people that have been anointed, they're being defined by our audience. So we have to be really curious and we have to put in the work to make sure that when our brands show up, when our stories show up, we're not just being in the right place, we're coming at with the right creative voice. I saw I was just at Demexco, a wonderful event over in Germany, and I was with Ogilvy, and they'd been working on a campaign that they'd done that I thought did this really, really well in marketing for people, creating an idea with a real value. And yes, in this case study, you'll see there's technology, there's targeting, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we like to talk about. But really, at the end, it's a beautifully designed, creative example of taking on a very tough challenge, selling a train journey to somebody who's looking to fly across to the other side of the world, and recontextualizing what train travel could mean to a young consumer. Let's take a look at it.
This was just the beginning. Then we asked ourselves, how can we bring relevance and attention to each comparison on social media, real time? The answer? With data and technology. Using an algorithm, we found lookalike photographs on Getty Images. Through Facebook data, we identified travel enthusiasts who are interested in specific destinations. For example, Lucas. Geo-targeting pinpoints Lucas' current location and the airport closest to him. Another algorithm finds the destination airport. This data is sent to a search engine that identifies the cheapest flight price in real time. We then show Lucas how much the cheapest flight costs and make him an unbeatable counteroffer, completely automated in an infinite number of variations, turning a unique visual idea into a real-time social media price comparison that moved Germany.
Super cool. And I think one of those things where, we see these ideas that, like, as I said, leverage some technology in some way, but at the end of the day, it also has to be beautifully designed. And what I love about that, it has a combination of the structure, but also it's just beautiful and really lovely. This next one is takes on a really big challenge. Those of us working in autos, demonstrating safety. And you'll see in the film, what I love about it is, when I talk about curation, it's like, it's not saying this is cool, that's not cool, this is dead, none of that. It's just looking and saying, what is the journey we want to take people on, and how do we build the best possible piece of craft within that, and then put them all together for an experience. And they did this really, really well with this idea called Tech Drive.
A quiet city street. Or is it?
You never get to test drive cars in dangerous situations like the one you just saw, which kind of makes sense. It's simply too dangerous. So even though cars and safety technologies have evolved, we still try them out much as we always have. Introducing Tech Drive. the only way to safely test Nissan's advanced safety features, because it takes place entirely in virtual reality.
Let's pick the right spot for our tech drive.
In this series of films, you'll feel the shock of almost hitting a pedestrian, the sudden scare of a freeway sideswiping, the stress of congested city driving, the jarring upset of backing into something you didn't see, and the relief when technology steps in to save you.
Now, as you drive, the Altima scans its environment, looking out for people like our skater friend here.
By putting you into dangerous driving situations virtually, Tech Drive can go where conventional test drives and traditional formats can't. To make that possible, we built a custom camera rig that allowed us to put people right into the action, not only outside the car, but inside as well, letting you get a feel for these technologies as realistically as possible, in new ways and from new places, like a first ever interactive 360 experience delivered right to the Facebook feeds of millions. From the comfort of couches in front of thousands of consoles. And of course, in VR headsets, at hundreds of dealerships and events across North America. You know, places you'd normally go for a test drive. Tech Drive is the safest way to take a test drive into danger, and the coolest way to experience how Nissan technologies can save the day. It's also proof of just how essential these features have become, because once you've felt, not just seen how they work, it's hard to imagine a world without them.
I love technology.
Yeah, really cool. And probably my favorite bit of that was the person who laughed as the person almost got run over. Did you hear that in the audience? It was like, ha ha. No, but the best part of that is that they didn't just do the VR. They looked at the VR and they said, we need to get more scale than VR. It's great people are going to come to dealerships, but this is valuable. We're going to build different experiences, and it's really important we do that. If there's one thing with curation that we have to talk about, and we're big on this, is if you follow that people move faster than companies, and generally small companies move faster than big companies, the biggest move that we're seeing, around everything is stories. Stories. I'm sure you've read about. I'm sure you use them. I hope you use them. But from a business standpoint, we're at the very early stages of this cultural platform, this global cultural platform. We've got 1 billion stories a day being created by people. People love seeing brands. 62% of people we research are more interested in brands when they see them showing up well in stories. But again, it comes back to this thing that the language, the structure of stories is being shaped by our audience. So as communicators, as creatives, as marketers, as strategists, we need to put more energy into unlocking the potential of this platform, not because we think it's cool, not because it could be interesting, because people have told us they're there and they've told us that they love it. And so this week, actually, we're doing some fun things around Ad Week to talk about, Advertising Week, to talk about stories and really start a conversation with the industry that this is a platform, this is an area, this is an experience that we think is going to continue to grow. And we want to make sure our industry is not just keeping up, but leading the way. Okay, so that's curation. The next thing I'd like to talk about is community. I've been at Facebook about 8.5 years, and it's grown and changed in many different ways. I think for the Facebook platform, I think one of the biggest growth areas is from friends and family into this idea of communities. This idea that there are groups. I don't know how many people in the room are a member of a group that you really like, but there's 10 million groups on Facebook, and there's 1.4 billion people a month connect with a group. And this idea that we're forming connections, whether it's something serious like a health condition, to something fun like a cooking group or a classic car or wine or whatever it may be, hiking, there's an infinite number of things. The thing that is interesting about this is that platforms where people can connect and share their stories and share what they care about are an amazing opportunity for us to change how we approach marketing. Not just even in a literal sense of how do we work with a specific group, but I think the philosophy that marketing really is the humanity of capitalism if we do it well. When we think about purpose, when we think about going beyond demography, to really care and think, how do we bend the resources and the privilege we have to be in this room, to have the budgets and the resources we have to bend the companies we do good for people around the world. That doesn't just come from demography, that comes from understanding the communities of the people we serve. How can we find them? How can we listen? How can we understand? How can we astound? How can we change the way we think about what we put out into the world? And so community for me is a really important vector of how we think about the people we serve, and it's also a really important thing of how we build different companies. It is impossible for us to build marketing departments or advertising agencies or technology companies that look and sound like me when the people we serve do not just look like me. And so the pursuit of diversity in our industry is mirrored to me with our focus on community. So we need to build more diverse communities inside our companies, we need to empower those communities, and then we can do better work outside, and they're in balance. This next example comes from one of the biggest markets, probably the biggest market in the world, from Procter & Gamble, and some work that we did in Thailand, and it's now expanding across APAC. But it takes on a very specific community with real partnership, and it's kind of a beautiful story, so I wanted to share it. See beauty, not gender.
At first glance, Thailand seems like an inclusive place for trans women, but the acceptance is superficial. Pantene wanted to use their upcoming product launch to drive meaningful change with social media, influencers, and online communities. Hair is the first expression of femininity for trans women as they transition, and Pantene has always fought for gender equality, but they did not want to appropriate someone else's experience. So to launch their new range, Pantene gave Thai trans women a stage to tell their story in their own authentic voices. This mobile-first campaign with social thinking at its core was co-created with influencers, creators, and activists from the trans community. It was directed by feature film director and activist Tanwarin Sukapisit.
เพราะคนที่แบบว่าจะเรียกเราว่าอีตุ๊ดกระเทยหรืออะไรก็ตามเนี่ยเรารู้สึกว่าเขาไม่ได้มีคำอื่นให้เขาเรียกอะแต่ทำยังไงล่ะเราถึงจะฝังชิปใหม่
And anchored by Poid, a transgender film star and iconic role model.
ทุกๆคำพูดที่ปอยได้ถ่ายทอดออกมาค่ะปอยรู้สึกแบบนั้นจริงๆ
Turns out they didn't want a pride pack or special attention. They wanted the unconscious bias to stop. When people label you and only see your gender, they miss everything else that is beautiful about you. See beauty, not gender.
ปอยไม่เห็นว่าเขาเป็นหญิงหรือชายปอยเห็นคนที่สวยงาม
The campaign featured short feed videos, images, streaming video, and interactive IG stories with a reach of 11 million, along with seeding and amplification from the celebrity handles, and a second wave of LGBTQI influencers and Thai cultural ambassadors mainstreamed the conversation. And the community sang back.
It's not every day that you get a chance to not just grow the business, but also to positively impact society.
But the best result? It created lasting commitment from Pantene. Poid is now an official brand ambassador, the world's first trans woman to be one. And Pantene Philippines just followed in our footsteps.
Isn't that great? Good on Procter & Gamble. Awesome. So let's move on to conversation and the idea of these spaces that we're sort of building that are different to the public square spaces that we've sort of grown up with when we think of social media. And I think the rise, and if you follow our company, our investment, our commitment to creating spaces for all of us that are private, ephemeral, and protected is something we're really deeply invested in. In terms of business, I think it's already a huge area and it'll increasingly be a huge area. We have 20 billion messages just on Messenger, 20 billion messages a month between people and businesses. So this is already organically a huge number. And to me, it defines the expectation we have. And the way I think about it is there's a myriad of different ways, but I just think it creates this amazing sort of almost magic trick that all business can feel like small business. If we think of our favorite small businesses that we love in our neighborhood, that we grew up with, the things we care about, done right, this kind of intimacy, this kind of dialogue creates that ability for businesses all over the world that are not, burdened by geography or anything else or scale. We can create this kind of dialogue, and we can create ideas that use that conversational flow in a really interesting way. So for the marketers in the room, for the creators in the room, I think this is something that we really need to embrace, and it's not just on our, at our company. This is something that goes across most technology platforms. This idea of having a two-way street, a dialogue, a service for the communities and the people we're really interested in. The question is it also creative? When I work with a lot of creative people, it's like, well, where is the creative idea? What is this going to do? Is this just CRM or is this something? I think it's a lot of different things. But I wanted to show you this idea because I really like it. And I like it for a few reasons. As I say in the film, it's quite a mundane topic. It's a washing machine for LG. And they created a wonderful idea that created a structure to create very funny, serious, and interesting conversations that all of us that do laundry face on laundry disasters. And this is it. It's called the Laundry Museum.
Have you ever ruined your laundry? Yes, it happens to everyone. We've all made the mistake of washing clothes that shouldn't have been mixed together. To resolve this common slip-up, LG Electronics designed the innovative Twin Wash, which comes with a dual washer in a single washing machine. How do we show the benefits of this ingenious washing machine while encouraging people to purchase the product?
What do I do?
We encouraged the consumers to discover the need for a separate, simultaneous washing machine by sharing their failed laundry stories. That was how the world's first and only laundry museum was born. The stories were collected through a custom-built messenger chat box, with selected stories being featured on social media to be voted by the public. The Laundry Museum showcased the most epic failures submitted by people all around the world. Laundry fail stories gained global traction, even leading to passionate debates on laundry fail prevention. These shared sentiments toward failed laundry brought attention to the need of a separate and simultaneous washing machine. The chat box also acted as a laundry consultant, offering advice for the perfect load, and offered a true-to-scale AR experience for people to try Twin Wash's scale in their very own home. More than 7,000 real-life laundry fail stories were submitted through the Laundry Museum campaign, with an increase 623% in search and a 330% lift in consumer purchase intent. The exhibit toured the world, building passionate communities on one of the most mundane chores, laundry. Dedicated to perfect loads, the Laundry Museum.
Super cool. And when you think your brief isn't interesting enough, I think they proved that you can do it for a lot of different things. So last I'll talk about commerce, and you know, I'm sure it's at panels throughout this conference. There's two big shifts that are going on. We're seeing all the amazing e-com startups, performance marketers that use amazing targeting and have built these extraordinary new brands, really care about branding, right? So they've started from a growth mentality. As they grow and mature, they're looking to build really brands that create love and emotion and heart. And we're looking at brands, sometimes some very established brands, looking to develop commerce relationships, looking to create a different kind of way to connect, to get conversion and to own the connection with their customers around the world. And this is a global phenomenon. Every industry is having this conversation. I think the thing that we focus on when we think about how our platforms show up in terms of marketing and business is really looking to create the zero friction future. If you look, from the marketer's room, if you look at the flow, the cost of having friction in that process is pretty extraordinary. The shopping carts that are filled and then abandoned this year alone will be $213 billion. We have very, very high standards as consumers for the speed and the ease with which we want to do this. So the more we can really focus on this throughout the process, and I think for the agencies involved to say, well, that's not over here. We need to integrate with this our storytelling. We need to integrate this with ideas so that the ideas that make people fall in love with us can also be converted into action. These things need to come together. We need to bust down the silos with what we're building and putting into the world. As it happens, I have an example of that happening. And this is from Italy and Renault and some work they did with a specific product where you could actually buy the vehicle right on Instagram. It's Tokyo Stories. crazy, right? You can sell cars on these things. It can do anything. So that's us. This is the first part of this talk today, really looking at some practical ways that I think about, that we think about structuring all the changes going on how to build through curating for a curated world, really thinking about communities, both our own communities inside our companies and the communities we serve, the power of conversation, and this zero friction future. But why? You know, like what is the urgency? We've been doing things reasonably the same for a long time. What is the urgency? And it comes back to me to this huge shift in our humility with which we approach our jobs, that people have infinite choice and total control, not only to receive our messages or avoid what we're putting into the world or judge or make their own decisions, but also to create their own businesses and their own ideas. Our audience are a creative community, and they demonstrate it every single day. And you know, there's two aspects to this. One, there's just content and contributing. The other, and this is a big part of my job that I've been doing for the last year from the business aspect of our company, is meeting with people all around the world that have taken their ideas and are building businesses. You know, there's never been a better time to have a good idea. And I've thought that for a long time. As someone who's been in the idea business for a long time and looked at the barriers and the complexity of getting ideas into the world to see whether it's a good idea, boy, we just have such freedom now that if we have an idea for a group, or we have an idea for a business, we have an idea for a movie, there are so many ways to express ourselves and see if there's an audience for that idea. This is a small business that started just in that way, on handmade. In the last 20 years, you know, the growth of female-owned businesses is up as 114%. But one of the figures that gets me the most is that last year alone, African-American-owned businesses started in America were at 400%. So to me, and in India, this one gets me. In India, 70% of women we surveyed said they started their business on WhatsApp. It was WhatsApp that enabled them to do it. So it's not just our platforms, but I look at our platforms and I say it's an extraordinary thing that these businesses do not start often as big, grand ideas. They start as just simple ideas that people want to get into the world. And if you work for a company like ours, or we're in this business, we have a job to make it simpler for people. One of the things we invest in, and my team run these around the world, are boost events. I don't know whether anyone's been to one. We have 240 we do around the world this year. And we bring in thousands of different businesses and entrepreneurs of all sizes to come and hang out with us and learn how to build. And it is easily the most inspiring thing you can possibly go to, because they're people who are betting maybe a little bit of their mortgage or their ideas and building these things and putting them into the world, and they want to know very quickly how they can grow them and how they can connect that idea to the people that matter. There's one that I met in India, this guy, Desi Hangover, Laksha Arora, and it's such an extraordinary company. He started in 2013 with nothing but a Facebook page. He simply looked at the history of Indian shoemaking, and he said, why can we not charge the same money for Indian shoes, which have a long history of making beautiful shoes, as European cobblers? And he started with this notion. And to cut to the forward, when I met him, he showed me a campaign he was running off his phone from Mumbai, targeting Amsterdam to people who were interested to do a pop-up they were doing to actually put his product right in the heart of the European capitals. And he was able to do it really simply and really efficiently. And it was like magical to him. So the marketing was one thing. The other thing he did was a network of cobblers that he needed to train and encourage all through India, that he was building this network, 50% of the women. So he had a supply chain running in the same way as he had a distribution, and putting the two together. Again, these things only work if we, in our seats, reduce complexity. Simplicity is the key. It's critical that if we look at the barriers that have existed throughout all of history, whether they're education, geography, economic, technical, even up until recently, technical barriers that we've got these things and we can't get them out there, we need to lower those. We need more opportunity for more people to do this, and that's what we're really focused on every day. We have a lot of advertisers at Facebook, but we have 90 million businesses, and the vast majority of them use our services for free, and they build some extraordinary things. I was in Canada for a pretty cool event we did. We had a lot of community groups we work with, and I met these amazing people. And so Newcomer Kitchen, I don't know whether anyone's heard their story. The 25,000 Syrian refugees came to Canada. And in Toronto, a local Canadian chef who had a pop-up kitchen, which chefs could come to, invited a few of the families over to cook. They were all in housing and hotels and disconnected. So he invited them to come and cook, just to cook some food, just to feel like they had a place in the world. And through that, they started Newcomer Kitchen on WhatsApp and on Facebook. And this group has grown now to hundreds of people who come not just to make food from across Syria, but also to sell it and to share it and build a community based on it. And they use the free tools to do this, and they were so enthusiastic and excited. And it really shows, again, not just community, but culture, this idea that people, humanity, is what drives these ideas that people connect with. And it's not just not-for-profits or things like this, it's also, I think, ideas that are the big ideas in the world. Last year, I had the great pleasure of judging in Cannes, and it was the social and influencer jury, and it was the first time we'd done it, so we didn't know what we were doing, as often the case with a new jury. And we looked at the work, and if I look from all over, thousands of different pieces of work. And if you look at the work that is what we're judging to be the finest in the industry, the stuff that gets the big awards, the stuff we celebrate, it has a common theme. And the theme is that they're ideas that are designed that if they want to shape culture, many marketers will say, we want an idea that's going to permeate culture that people are going to run with. It has to be shaped by culture. If you want to shape culture, you have to be willing to have your idea be shaped by the people we're building it for. It comes back to the starting point. Our audience makes more than we do. They have a voice, and we can't just talk at them. We have to listen to them, and we have to do this together. And those are the ideas that really permeate. This was a photo actually from just 4 days ago in Sydney with the climate strike. And if there's an issue in the world that we can focus on that brings people together into the streets, it's that. And I'll play an idea that from Cannes, again, this is from last year, that I think was really special, by Gray and Whaler. Some other folks did it. And it's perfectly timed for about 40 blocks down to the east where this idea needs to sit. This is the people's seat.
We're facing our greatest threat in thousands of years. Climate change. Governments will meet to address the defining issue of our time.
For the first time, there'll be one seat there that's not for a nation. It's been called the People's Seat, and the idea is it will give ordinary people a voice on this all-important issue.
The United Nations is launching a seat, the People's Seat.
Climate change is actually too important to leave to government. That is why Sir David Attenborough is telling people all over the world, if you don't speak up, nobody will.
Use #TakeYourSeat to send your message.
Climate change is already affecting us in a really scary way.
I'm Ulla Jones. This used to be my home and my neighbor's home.
I want the world leaders to recognize that threat and take action.
We've seen all these young people respond to the #TakeYourSeat.
The thought that people could speak directly to those who are responsible, how could it have been more powerful?
To represent the voice of the people and deliver the first ever People's Seat address. Sir David Attenborough.
This is the people's message.
We're asking you, the United Nations, to please act now.
The world's people have spoken. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations is on the horizon.
David Attenborough has delivered a message to all of us.
The collapse of our civilization is on the horizon.
To have the people's voice heard is incredibly powerful.
This is a movement that has to be carried by people.
Breaking news out of Poland.
Historic moment, 200 countries agreeing they will limit damaging greenhouse gases.
It is the most important seat you will ever take.
Indeed it is. So that's really it. This change, if you think back to that wonderful photo of me as a small child in New Zealand, I can assure you that creativity, marketing, advertising is far more interesting now than it ever has been. Creativity won. The democratization of access to these platforms is unleashing so many positive ideas in the world and empowering all of you. And we all sit in, if you've got a lanyard on, you set advertising, we sit in privileged positions to use this opportunity to build ideas that change how, not just marketing, but how business is done, how companies are run, and how we tell stories in the world that reflect different communities, that build more diversity, that do good as well as growing, companies and economies. This is good, important work, but we have to embrace the change. We cannot look to the past to see how we're going to build the future. We have to look to the people we're serving. Hence the real focus, that we want to be marketing for people, in service of people. And if we want ideas that are going to really take off, we have to market with them. Thanks very much.